What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Best ball summer is in full swing right now. It is one of my favorite things to do, and it is one of my favorite ways to prepare for my upcoming redraft leagues in the fall because those are coming sooner than we think. They're probably right around the corner. By the time you go take your family vacations and do all of the things that you do during the summer, those single season drafts are going to be right here. So this is one of my favorite ways to prepare for them. I have a team that I drafted. This is from the Golden Tournament over on Underdog Fantasy. I used a 0 RB strategy and I really liked the way that the team turned out. I want to talk a little bit about this draft, walk you through some of my thoughts, some of my strategies when approaching this one, and show you guys the team. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about this team. Now, as I mentioned, this draft is called the Golden. This is a single entry tournament, so you only get to draft one team, whereas a lot of times on Underdog Fantasy, you can draft multiple teams in the same tournament, but this one is a single entry. It is also fast drafts only, so you only have about 30 to 60 seconds per pick, and they have a total prize pool of $50,000, $10,000 going to the team that wins this tournament. So this is the type of tournament that we entered. Obviously, it is a 12-team league. It has 18 rounds in the draft. So let's talk about some of the roster settings for this type of tournament. As you guys can see on the screen, this is a one quarterback draft. So it is not super flex. Normally we talk about super flex on this channel because it is my favorite type of format to play, but very little underdog drafts are super flex. So most of them are going to be your one quarterback draft. So I still draft a lot of these teams. They're just on Underdog Fantasy. All of my dynasty teams, all my redraft teams, they are typically super flex. But we have one quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, a flex, a tight end, and 10 bench spots in this type of league. So for the scoring settings in this one, it is a half-point PPR league. Everything else is pretty much standard. You have your 6-point touchdowns, you have your receiving yards being 0.1, all of that good stuff, but it is a half-point PPR league, so that is something to note. So getting into this draft here, like I said, I wanted to take a 0 running back approach. So let's talk about these first 9 rounds here. Like I said, it's 18 rounds, so we'll walk through the first half, then we'll walk through the second half. But as I loaded in, I got the 10 spot. So I'm drafting in that turn there at the back end of the first round from the 10th overall pick. So you see how the first round went. Because it is one quarterback, obviously no quarterbacks coming off the board, whereas in your Superflex leagues, those guys would be coming off very quickly. So we have all of these guys come off the board. Guys that I would really have liked to get would have been a CeeDee Lamb, a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Obviously, those guys most likely were not going to fall to the 110. So I went with a guy who I think is being undervalued right now by the community. I took A.J. Brown at the 110. And then we get around the turn there where a couple running backs come off the board, the Jahmyr Gibbs, the Breece Hall, the Jonathan Taylors, and then I double stack it up with Marvin Harrison Jr. So this feels like a kind of riskier pick in a single season format because obviously in our dynasty leagues, we really like what Marvin Harrison Jr. can do. We have the potential of Marvin Harrison being very, very high. He could be in that Justin Jefferson, in that CeeDee Lamb, in that Jamar Chase type of territory. But what is he going to do as a rookie? It's going to be interesting to watch. I am going to be taking the bet on Marvin Harrison because if he has a very good rookie year, which I think he can have a very good rookie year, that gives me multiple wide receivers that I can rely on in this type of format. So then you come around, you have more wide receivers come off the board. It's very wide receiver heavy draft, but because we're still going with that 0 RB, we are going to push that so far down the draft board. And then going to our third pick here, pick 34, we take Cooper Kupp. And Cooper Kupp, he's a guy who potentially could be on his decline as an NFL player. Now, a lot of people probably don't like what Cooper Kupp did last season because it quite frankly wasn't one of the best seasons ever for Cooper Kupp. And then obviously the emergence of Puka Nacua has a lot of people second guessing what Kupp can be in this offense. Now, from a fantasy points per game standpoint, Cooper Kupp was still elite for our fantasy football teams. Matthew Stafford is still going to feed him the football. I think if he shows that he's healthy this year, this is a guy who can still give you at worst high-end wide receiver 2 numbers. And so I took the gamble on a Cooper Kupp where a lot of people are fading him, and I took him as my wide receiver 3 in this offense, pairing me with a big 3 at that starting wide receiver position for A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Cooper Kupp. Now moving on over there to the 4th round, that is where I wanted to take another shot at a player that a lot of people are kind of fading. Now, he is coming off the board here as tight end 2, so not being faded too much, but we did take Travis Kelce, and that's kind of the luxury of using this 0 RB strategy is you can go and get an elite player at a different position because you are punting that running back position. You kind of get to look at some of the other ones. So in a one quarterback league, I wasn't going to take the shot on the quarterback because I think I can get a couple guys later and potentially get some stacks with the wide receivers that I have. So I felt felt like going at the tight end position probably would be a difference-making type of pick, and I took a guy who I think can give you elite numbers at that position. So I went Travis Kelce here. I think he is going to be able to put up similar numbers to a wide receiver 1 to a wide receiver 2 in our lineups. Still, even though he's getting a little bit older and people are saying he's slowing down, taking the gamble there, I think he's still going to be very good. And then we had our long turn here where it went all the way around. We had a couple quarterbacks come off the board. You see the Jalen Hurts, the Pat Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Lamar Jackson. All of those elite quarterbacks kind of start coming off the board here in this 4th round. Now going to the 5th round pick that we had, there was a couple players that I really wanted. I really wanted to get George Pickens to fall because I think he can be pretty good this year as the number 1 wide receiver option there in Pittsburgh, but he didn't fall. So as a couple more guys came off the board, you had the Mark Andrews, the Keenan Allen, the Christian Kirk, the Xavier Worthy. I ended up going with Jayden Reed. And I think this is one of the first picks in the first 5 rounds where I was a little bit unsure. But Jayden Reed, he flashed potential for us last year. He showed us that he has enough ceiling. I just don't know if the consistency is going to come for Jayden Reed. But when you're drafting him as your wide receiver 4 on a team and in a best ball type of format where every week we don't have to make those starting wide receiver decisions, it is going to play the best players every single week for us. We don't have to make those start sits. I think Jayden Reed has a lot of value, so I still take Jayden Reed here, and it still keeps me diverse amongst my top 5 players where I'm not crossing streams here with any of these players. All of them are on different teams, and I have a lot of flexibility here at these positions. So you go back around one more time. That's that short turn. That's where I went with Chris Godwin. And Chris Godwin, he's a player who a lot of people are down on because last year wasn't that great. Now, obviously, they drafted Jalen McMillan in the 3rd round of the NFL draft, and a lot of people like Jalen McMillan coming out of Washington. They think if he was healthy for the full year last year, he would have been a lot higher of a NFL draft pick than he was. That's probably something we still have to see down the road, but the rumor is that Chris Godwin is going to go back to playing in the slot, and playing in the slot is where Chris Godwin thrives. If he does do that, he should see an uptick in his 2024 production, and I'm willing to take a gamble on him here as my wide receiver 5. And obviously, the key component of this is 0 running backs, so like we've talked about, there is 0 running backs in sight for our team yet, and we've already drafted a tight end 1 and 5 wide receivers. So then we get our long turn. You get a couple more of these tight ends come off the board. Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers, George Kittle. And that's kind of something that I looked at a little bit later in this draft and felt like, man, there's still a tight end like George Kittle and still a tight end like Kyle Pitts where you can get them 2-3 rounds later than where I drafted Travis Kelce. Maybe they're not going to be as consistent. Maybe the ceiling isn't as high, but you're still getting a better value on them. So it made me kind of think maybe I shouldn't have taken Travis Kelce. But looking back at the team and looking back at the build when it was all said and done, I still feel comfortable with that pick, but I do think that there's a lot of good tight end value as you get down here. Now, this turn also had a lot of the young talent come off the board. So Rome Odunze, Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Brian Thomas, Keon Coleman, Rashee Rice. A lot of these guys come off the board that have high ceilings to us. So because of that, it felt like a lot of the veterans were being undervalued. So you see right here, as we get to that 7th round pick, I end up taking DeAndre Hopkins. Now, DeAndre Hopkins, he was a 1,000-yard wide receiver last year for the Tennessee Titans, and now they've added head coach Brian Callahan. They have Will Levis in year 2 of his deal. They obviously added Calvin Ridley as well, so there is going to be a chance that this team is improved going into the 2024 season. I certainly expect them to pass a lot more than they have years past under Mike Vrabel, so I am going to take the gamble on DeAndre Hopkins. Again, a little bit of an older wide receiver, kind of like Cooper Kupp, a little bit of an older player like Travis Kelce, but I think he was being undervalued, and at this point in the draft, like I said, as my wide receiver 6, this is a guy that I'm willing to take the gamble on. And now that we have 6 wide receivers on my team, I was willing to fully abandon the position. We don't really want to look at adding any more wide receivers because now we are going to take that shotgun approach. We're going to get as many of these high-end handcuffs, these ambiguous backfields, and get as many of these running backs on our roster as possible because we need to fill out that running back room throughout the season. So you see, we get around the turn. James Conner comes off the board right away. He was somebody that I was really looking at because I think he is very undervalued as well. But then we had Raheem Mostert, and we all know the story of Raheem Mostert last year. Led the NFL in touchdowns. Yes, they added competition this year in Jalen Wright, but I felt like Raheem Mostert still is going to get the first nod at kind of being the guy to lead this backfield with Devon Achane. So I still took Raheem Mostert. The upside is going to be there in that Miami Dolphins offense. I think he's worth the gamble at this point and somebody that we're just willing to take a shot on here at this running back position. So we have that long turn go around, and Zach Moss is a guy that I like. Nick Chubb a discount, Tony Pollard, Austin Eckler, Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Warren. These are kind of the running backs that come off the board. And then you had Trey Benson as well, who I also like in this rookie class. But then we ended up up getting Javonte Williams. So Javonte Williams, obviously the running back 1A maybe in this offense for the Denver Broncos. So Javonte Williams, a guy that I believe in. He hasn't necessarily shown his full potential yet, but this is going to be a make or break year for Javonte Williams. And in this type of offense where Bo Nix potentially will be checking down a little bit more, even though they have Jaleel McLaughlin, who could take some of that role from Javonte Williams, I have to take the shot on a player this talented when we have the zero running back build. So he does end up being that pick for us in the 9th round, and we get him as the 106th player off the board. So still a great value on Javonte Williams. Now moving on to the back half of the draft where we have rounds 10 to rounds 18, you see we still keep it pushing. So here at 111, just around that short turn, we take Brian Robinson Jr. He has got some added competition in Austin Eckler, but obviously we also think that Jaden Daniels should help improve this offense. Maybe that means there's going to be more scoring opportunities for Brian Robinson Jr. Maybe when you have that rushing quarterback in Jaden Daniels, it's going to kind of increase the efficiencies of the running backs in this room, similar to how we see the Baltimore Ravens running backs be super efficient when they have a guy like Lamar Jackson playing the quarterback position. So we end up going Brian Robinson Jr. Speaking of Jaden Daniels, he goes right after him. And then we didn't have too many running backs, but still a couple come off the board. So Devin Singletary, Gus Edwards, and Tajay Spears. Now, as we got to our next pick, this is where I kind of wanted to start looking at that quarterback position. And you'll see over the next couple of rounds, I draft 3 quarterbacks. And now I think that's a strategy where if I could go back and do it again, I probably would only draft 2, but I still don't hate the idea of having 3 because it will cycle through the best performer every single week. And what I did and what I wanted to try and do was find a stack for my roster to kind of increase some upside. So I went with Matthew Stafford here. Stafford comes off the board. We obviously have Cooper Kupp earlier in the draft, so I get that Stafford and Kupp stack. That is something that I feel very solid about. And then as we come around that turn, Chase Brown is our next running back pick. So this backfield in Cincinnati, we obviously know that they signed Zach Moss. Zach Moss had a great year last year, and I have talked about in a recent video where I feel like Zach Moss is the guy to own in the backfield, but I would be lying if I felt like that was 110% accurate. I do think that Chase Brown has a chance in this backfield, and like I said, even though Zach Moss is my first choice to lead the backfield, there is a chance for Chase Brown. He was efficient last year on his limited touches, so we take a guy like Chase Brown as a flyer in this running back room. Takes us around that long term again. You had running backs like Ford, Dowdle, Zeke, Corum, Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, Ty Chandler, all of these guys come off the board in that big long turn. Now that takes us right back to the quarterback position, and I get another stack for our lineup. So we go Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield obviously being stacked with Chris Godwin, who we took earlier in this draft as well. So now we have the Matthew Stafford and the Cooper Kupp stack. We also have the Baker Mayfield and the Chris Godwin stack. I love stacking my quarterbacks in best ball leagues. It just is one of my favorite strategies. So now that we have those 2 stacks, I probably could have stopped there. We probably didn't need to add another quarterback, like I mentioned. But let's keep it pushing. We go around the turn. Chuba Hubbard was our next pick. I look back at this one, and I probably should have picked something different. I think Ray Davis has more upside. I think a guy like Kendre Miller has more upside. So this is probably a pick that I don't like making on this lineup, so I probably would go back and change this one, but we had a very short clock. It was running out of time. I was looking through a lot of the running backs, and I had to make a selection, so I go with Chuba Hubbard. I think you can make an argument for Chuba here because of Jonathan Brooks' ACL injury. Now, there is a chance that Jonathan Brooks is healthy week 1, but maybe he's healthy and playing in the lineup, but maybe they're not giving him a full workload right away. So maybe Chuba Hubbard, he has some value. He did lead that backfield last year. I know Miles Sanders is still there. Like I said, I probably would change this pick if I could go back and make that selection again, but you could make an argument for Chuba Hubbard getting an early workload for this type of team in this offense. So we go around the long turn, we get into the 15th round, and this is where I triple down on the quarterback position. I end up going with Will Levis, quarterback of the Tennessee Titans, and he feels like such a high upside swing. There's a lot of risk with a guy like Will Levis, but he feels like a high upside swing at these points in best ball drafts. So I take Will Levis. We obviously have DeAndre Hopkins, so we stack him with Hopkins in this lineup, giving us 3 stacks in this team. The Will Levis and DeAndre Hopkins stack, the Baker Mayfield, Chris Godwin stack, and the Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp stack. So we feel very, very good about these stacks because any given week, when one of these quarterbacks throws a touchdown to one of those wide receivers, we are going to get the double points for that stack in the touchdown department. So feel very good about that. Short turn right around here again. Tyrone Tracy comes off the board. He's a sneaky player, probably not a player that I'm going to have a ton of exposure to in my best ball drafts because he does seem like he's coming up the board a little bit. But you have Khalil Herbert right here. Now, I will tell you, Jaleel McLaughlin is probably a better pick in this round, but because we had Javonte Williams earlier in this draft, I didn't want to take 2 guys in the same backfield. I wanted to diversify that running back room. So we do go with Khalil Herbert. He has a chance to kind of have a little bit of a role behind DeAndre Swift. He's obviously competing with Roschon Johnson, but we've also heard rumors rumors of Khalil Herbert being a guy who is potentially being traded, or there's been rumors of him being traded in this market right now. So maybe Herbert finds himself into a different situation where he has a little bit clearer pathway to touches. Maybe he just stays here in Chicago and earns his touches in this backfield. But I wanted to stay diverse in that running back room, so we didn't take Jaleel McLaughlin due to already having Javonte Williams, but we do go with Khalil Herbert there. And then that long term, we didn't really have any other running backs come off the board other than Dameon Pierce. So it gives us one more chance to grab another running back here. And I take Alexander Mattison from the Las Vegas Raiders. And Mattison, a very disappointing year in 2023 with the Minnesota Vikings, but he goes into that offense in Las Vegas where the only other guys there are going to be Zamir White and maybe Dylan Luwabe, if you like Dylan Luwabe. But Mattison should be able to be kind of a pass catching type of running back in this offense. He should have some third down play potential in this offense. And also, if there was ever a Zamir White injury, maybe Alexander Mattison is the guy who is going to fill in for him while he misses some time. So that's kind of the idea to the Alexander Mattison pick. I don't have like high hopes for Mattison this year, but there is a easier pathway to touches than some of the other guys that are in this tier. And then coming around one more time, I had to get a backup tight end. We had Travis Kelce early, so I wanted to punt the backup tight end for a long time because when you take a pick like Travis Kelce, you assume that 99.9% of the time, if he is playing a football game, he is going to be the highest producing tight end for your team. So I ended up taking Greg Dulcich. Dulcich feels like a guy who has a lot of upside, and I talked about him in a recent video where I said he's kind of a sneaky stash for our teams going into the 2024 season. That Denver Broncos offense kind of has a lot of guys that don't have proven production yet. You have Marvin Mims, hasn't really proven himself. Troy Franklin, a rookie. You also have Bo Nix, a rookie, so we don't know where he is going to lean as far as who he relies on in this offense. You hear the rumors about how rookie quarterbacks tend to lean on the tight end. You could kind of make that argument for Greg Dulcich, and this is a guy who I had thought was very talented coming out of UCLA. Obviously, the injuries have kind of derailed his career up to this point. You want to see him stay healthy, but this is more of a high upside swing at that tight end position. And like I said, because Travis Kelce is on this lineup, hopefully we only have to use Greg Dulcich once when Travis Kelce is on bye. So that is our backup pick at the tight end position. So let's talk about this team as a whole. Looking at the quarterback room, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield, Will Levis. I like the value on all of these guys, and we stacked them all with wide receivers on this team. Speaking of the wide receivers, this was the strong point of the roster because we went with a zero running back build. So we have guys like A.J. Brown, Marvin Harrison Jr., Cooper Kupp, Jaden Reed, Chris Godwin, and DeAndre Hopkins. So a little bit shallow, but we're relying on the high-end talent in this lineup. And now we'll look at the running backs because zero running back, we punted the position, but this is the running back room that we came away with. Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson Jr., Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard, Khalil Herbert, and Alexander Mattison. Some murky situations, some ambiguous backfields, but hopefully these guys find touches and find themselves as serviceable players any given week when we can just plug them into the running back 1 or the running back 2 lineup. And then last but not least, our tight end room, Travis Kelce, Greg Dulcich should get a lot of high-end production out of Kelce. So all in all, that is the team. Want to know what you guys think of this zero running back build. If you guys do want to play and do some drafts over on Underdog Fantasy to prepare for your 2024 redraft leagues, or just have some extra fun here in Best Ball Summer, I strongly suggest you guys go do it. Use code LEAGUEFFB when you sign up, or click the link in the description. That is going to give you a 100% deposit match. Also going to give you guys a free play on their Pick'ems play. So make sure you sign up using code LEAGUEFFB. It does directly support the channel, so I do appreciate you guys doing that if you want to get some extra draft practice for those 2024 leagues. So that is all I have for you guys today. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. That way you guys never miss a future upload, and make sure you're hitting that notification bell. That way you are notified when those uploads do come out. And last but not least, make sure you guys go sign up for the Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description. I'm in there helping you guys with your fantasy football teams all season long. So make sure you go join that Discord. It is free to join, like I mentioned. With all that out of the way, I will see you guys on our next video. But until then, peace out.